The bank manager slid a single sheet of paper across the mahogany table, and the room went so quiet I could hear my mother's bracelets shaking. My name is Danielle Ross. I'm 32 years old, and 40 minutes earlier my parents had stood in front of everyone we knew and handed my younger brother the keys to a $9 million family business that legally belonged, in part, to me. They had spent my whole life treating me like the spare daughter who existed to nod along and clap politely. They never once imagined I'd been listening. Welcome back to Cherry Revenge Tales. If you're watching this tonight, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're joining us from. And if you believe in quiet, calm justice, the kind that doesn't need to shout to win, go ahead and like this video and subscribe before we start. Now let me take you back 1 week, to the dinner where all of this began. It was a Sunday, the kind of Sunday my mother turned into a production. White tablecloth, my father's good scotch, and my brother Marcus sitting at the head of the table like he already owned it, because in his mind he did. My parents had built Ross and Holt Distribution over 30 years, a mid-sized logistics company that moved freight up and down the East Coast, and everyone in the family knew it was the thing my father was proudest of in his entire life. I had worked there too, quietly, for 6 years, handling contracts and vendor relationships nobody bothered to ask about. Marcus had worked there for 18 months, and mostly took long lunches. To the future of Ross and Holt, my father said, raising his glass, which starts with Marcus taking over as president next month. Marcus grinned like a man who'd already spent the money. My mother beamed at him the way she used to beam at his report cards, back when mine were better, and nobody noticed. Someone has to carry the name forward, she said, glancing at me the way you'd glance at a chair that needed dusting. And Danielle? Well, you were always better suited to the paperwork side of things. The paperwork side of things? I smiled, cut my chicken, and said nothing. I had learned a long time ago that in that house, defending yourself only gave them more to attack. My Aunt Rosalind, seated near the middle of the table, tried to soften things the way she always did, saying she was sure I had plenty to offer in my own way. My mother patted my hand like I was a child who'd lost a spelling bee. Nobody's saying you didn't work hard, sweetheart, she said. We're just being realistic about who fits the image of a company president. Clients want someone who looks like leadership. You understand. I understood exactly what she meant, and exactly what she didn't say out loud, which was that in her mind, leadership had a certain face, and mine had never been it, not since the day Marcus was born 3 years after me and became the son my father had always wanted a version of himself in. Marcus wasn't finished. He never was. Honestly, Danny, don't look so sour, he said, swirling his scotch like he'd seen someone do it in a movie. Not everyone is built to run something. Some people are built to answer phones. It's fine, we still love you. The table laughed, softly, politely, the way people laugh when cruelty is dressed up as affection. My father added that it was simply smarter business to put the name on someone with vision, someone people would respect walking into a boardroom. I kept my eyes on my plate and thought about the folder sitting in my desk drawer at home, the one with my late grandfather's handwriting on it, the one none of them knew I had, because here's what my family forgot. Ross and Holt hadn't started with my father. It had started with my grandfather, Walter Ross, who built the first warehouse with his own hands in 1988, and when he passed 6 years ago, he hadn't left his 22% ownership stake to my father outright. He'd left it in a trust, with instructions that it transfer to whichever grandchild demonstrates sustained, hands-on commitment to the company, to be verified by the family attorney at the time of any leadership transition. Everyone assumed that meant Marcus, the grandson with his name already stitched onto his office door. Nobody had checked the actual paperwork. I had. I'd been checking it for years. After dinner, my mother cornered me in the kitchen while I was drying glasses. We need you to sign something, she said, sliding a document across the counter, a formal waiver relinquishing any claim to company shares, in the interest of family harmony. My father hovered behind her, arms crossed. It's just a formality, Danielle. You don't even want to run a business. Sign it, and we can all move forward as a family. I looked at the paper. I looked at both of them. What happens if I don't sign? I asked, keeping my voice level, almost gentle. My father's jaw tightened. Then you're choosing to make this difficult, and difficult people don't get invited to things anymore. Is that really the hill you want to die on? Over a business you never even wanted? I never said I didn't want it, I said quietly. You just never asked. He waved that away like it was a fly near his ear. You've never had the stomach for this kind of pressure, Danielle. You get quiet when things get hard. Marcus knows how to command a room. That matters more than knowing how to file a spreadsheet. My mother nodded along, adding that some people lead, and some people support the people who lead, and that I should be proud of the role I was naturally suited to. I stood there absorbing every word, filing it away the same careful way I filed everything else in that company, knowing that someday, somebody in that family was going to regret handing me so much material to work with. I set the dish towel down slowly. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said. If it's really just a formality, it can wait. My mother's face flushed red. Marcus appeared in the doorway, arms folded, sneering the way he did when he was 9 and I'd beaten him at chess. She's doing this because she's jealous, he said to no one in particular. She's always been jealous. It's kind of sad, actually. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I picked up my purse, thanked my mother for dinner, and left. Behind me I heard my father mutter that I was being difficult on purpose, and my mother say she didn't understand where this coldness came from. I understood it perfectly. It came from 30 years of practice. The next morning, I called the family attorney myself, a woman named Patricia Ibarra, who had handled my grandfather's estate. I asked her to send me certified copies of the original trust documents. She'd been trying to reach my parents for 2 years about an unresolved verification requirement tied to the transfer, she said, but they kept postponing the meeting. I told her I wanted everything on record before the transition to Marcus was finalized. She said the paperwork alone wouldn't be enough if this ever turned into a fight in front of witnesses, and she was right. So I did something I'd never done in that family before. I decided to record it. That night I set up my phone on a bookshelf during a call with Marcus, who wanted to talk sense into me before the announcement. I also started wearing my smartwatch everywhere that week, and quietly turned on its voice memo function before any conversation that mattered, letting it sit innocently on my wrist while people said things they'd later wish they hadn't. On that call, Marcus told me plainly that if I caused a scene at the announcement dinner, he'd make sure I was cut out of everything, not just the business. He said our parents already planned to leave me nothing in their wills if I kept being difficult. You've always needed someone to hold your hand through the hard parts, he told me, laughing a little, like it was a joke between old friends, instead of a threat between siblings. Let me have this one thing, Danny. You'll still have your little job. Nobody's taking that away from you. I asked him, calmly, what exactly he thought he was giving me permission to keep. He didn't answer that. He just said I should be grateful there was a place for me at all, once he was running things properly. I said very little. I let him talk. The recording caught every word. 2 days later, my father called me into his home office, the same room where he used to make me redo my math homework as a child, until it was acceptable. He told me the paperwork for the transition was already moving, and that my mother had scheduled a small notary visit that Friday, just to clean up a few old details on some outdated shareholder forms. He slid a pen across the desk. It's routine, he said. Sign here, and initial there. We're not trying to hide anything from you, Danielle. We just need this handled quietly before the announcement so nothing gets messy in front of people. I picked up the pen, turned it over once in my fingers, and set it back down without signing. I'd like my own attorney to review it first, I said. His face went tight and red in that particular way it always did right before he raised his voice. You don't need an attorney to sign paperwork with your own family, he snapped. I told him that was exactly when people needed one the most. The announcement dinner came a week later, held at the Wexford Hotel ballroom in front of 40 guests, extended family, longtime employees, 2 board members, and, at my quiet request to Patricia herself. My father stood at a podium beneath a banner that read Ross and Holt, the next generation, and gave a long speech about legacy and vision, ending by calling Marcus up to receive a framed copy of the new ownership documents. Marcus stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked directly at me with a smile that said he'd already won. That's when I stood too. Before we celebrate, I said, my voice calm and carrying, I think it's important everyone here understands exactly what's being signed away tonight, and by whom. My father's smile faltered. My mother's hand froze on her wine glass. I asked Patricia, who was seated near the back, if she'd mind clarifying the terms of my grandfather's trust for the room. She rose, unhurried, opened a folder, and said the words I had been waiting years to hear spoken out loud in front of everyone. Under Walter Ross's original trust, 22% ownership was never assigned to Marcus. Per the documented terms, it was assigned to Danielle Ross 18 months ago, following a formal verification I conducted myself, based on 6 years of continuous operational involvement she alone could demonstrate. Any transfer of company leadership completed without accounting for her stake would be legally invalid. The ballroom went dead silent. Somewhere near the back, a phone buzzed. My father's face drained of color. "That's not possible," he said. "There's some mistake." Patricia didn't blink. "There's no mistake, Mr. Ross. You were sent 3 notices requesting a verification meeting. You didn't respond to any of them." As if summoned by the moment itself, a man in a gray suit stepped forward from near the entrance and introduced himself as a compliance officer from First Meridian Bank, the institution holding the company's operating accounts and the deed to the main warehouse property. He said the bank had flagged an irregularity that morning, when the new ownership paperwork was filed, because Danielle Ross's name was already listed on the deed as a partial title holder, and had been for over a year. Then he asked the only question that mattered, looking straight at my father. "Can you explain why you attempted to transfer full operational control of this company without the consent of a legal co-owner?" My father had no answer. Marcus, still holding his framed certificate, looked down at it like it had turned to ash in his hands. "You knew," he said to me, his voice cracking, not with sadness but with panic. "You knew this whole time, and you let me stand up here." My mother grabbed his arm, hissing something about damage control, and Marcus shoved her hand away, hissing back that this was her fault for never checking the paperwork properly. They stood there, in front of 40 guests, tearing into each other in whispers that weren't quiet enough. My father sat down slowly in his chair, staring at the banner above his own head like it was mocking him. I walked to the podium. I didn't raise my voice, because I never needed to. "You told me I was better suited to the paperwork side of things," I said, looking at my mother. "You were right. I read every page." I turned to Marcus. "And you told me some people are built to answer phones. Funny thing about phones, they record." I set the recording device on the podium and played 11 seconds of him promising to cut me out of everything if I caused a scene. Nobody in that room said a word for a long time. I didn't stay to watch the rest unfold. I thanked Patricia, thanked the compliance officer for his time, and walked out into the cold night air feeling, for the first time in years, like I belonged to myself. If you've ever been the one in your family who got called difficult for simply expecting fairness, I want you to hear this. Being underestimated isn't a weakness, it's cover. The people who quietly do the work, who keep their composure while others take the credit, are usually the ones holding the truth nobody else bothered to check. You don't have to shout to be taken seriously. You don't have to fight loud to win. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay calm, keep your receipts, and let the truth introduce itself when the room is finally listening. Thank you so much for watching this story here on Cherry Revenge Tales. If it meant something to you, please like the video and subscribe for more. And if you haven't already, let us know in the comments where you're watching from tonight.